Y'all need to put some respect on John Mateer.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Sooner Nation? Welcome to Locked On Sooners, and thank you for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Shout out to all the everydayers out there. Tune in and subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can get in on the action right now with your first $5 bet. If it wins, you can get $150 in bonus bets back with FanDuel. Go join today. I'm John Williams. This is Jay Smith. And we got more early quarterback rankings coming out, this time from Steve Lasan of Athlon Sports. He puts John Mateer at number 7, Jay. Number 7. Behind the likes of Arch Manning at number 1, Garrett Nussmeier at number 2, Lenora Sellers number 3, DJ Lagway 4, Diego Pavia at number 5, and Nico Iamaleava at number 6.
So I understand him being quote unquote middle of the pack because everybody wants John Mateer to prove that he can play in the SEC. But I don't understand why Arch Manning would be above Garrett Nussmeier. Now, granted, if you've seen me on our SEC squad shows, I throw jabs at the LSU fans just for the kicks of it around Nussmeier because Nussmeier's been there this entire time. He's been there 4 years. While there was a couple of people that's taken his job. Or at least have won the job over him. But the good thing for him is he's taken his time, developed, and has gotten better. And I do believe that he is the best quarterback in the SEC, mainly for one reason. He threw for 4,000 yards last year, John. Like, why are we doing this and pretending like he shouldn't be the front runner just because Manning has that last name? Now, granted, I do believe that Arch Manning has a very high ceiling. And in the times I've seen him play, I think that he has capabilities. But until it's proven, I would not put him above Lenora Sellers yet. And John Mateer at 7, John, I get it. While at the same time, I don't understand why people believe that a quarterback can't transition from another conference and be successful, in which that happens in the SEC all the darn time.
All the darn time. We saw Diego Pavia do it just last year.
He didn't put up anywhere near the numbers that John Mateer did at his former spot. Now, Diego Pavia is really good, but at the same time, he didn't do what John Mateer did. So I guess the question, John, is, are the numbers that Mateer put up, can he repeat that? Like, just in general, not even depending on conference. Is it something that he could repeat? And truth be told, I think it's a little bit easier than people expect.
I don't even think he has to repeat the numbers to be considered a top 3 or 4 quarterback in the conference by the end of the season. I think if Oklahoma goes and wins 9-10 games and he rushes for, say, 600 yards and 6 touchdowns or 8 touchdowns and throws for another 3,000 yards, I still think that puts him in the conversation as one of the top quarterbacks in the SEC. To your point about Arch Manning, I'm with you. I think this time next year, if Arch Manning goes and has the season that everybody's expecting him to have, one in which he's going to contend for the Heisman Trophy, one in which Texas is going to contend for the national title, then next year, yes, let's put him at the top of the SEC quarterback rankings. But to do it right now, as hyped as I was about Jackson Arnold last year going into the 2024 season, I did not have him as the number 1 quarterback in the SEC. So yep. We're doing Arch Manning a little bit of a disservice right now by throwing all these flames behind him and saying, you are it, man. You are the second coming of Jesus Christ as a quarterback, and you are not going to be able to do any wrong. While he's replacing so much along his offensive line and at wide receiver and at tight end and bringing back running backs that were hurt. I listen, at this point, forgive me for saying this, I'm kind of rooting for the kid to actually succeed because the hype behind him is so crazy at this point. Yeah. But to John Mateer, man, like John Mateer at 7 behind Nico Iamaleava, like do we remember what we saw from Nico the last time he played a game? The dude was getting trounced by Ohio State, couldn't get the ball off, wouldn't let go. He looked like Jackson Arnold for much of the 2024 season in that game.
I mean, he kind of looked like that against Oklahoma too. Like
He,
early in the season, let's be real. I mean, 2 fumbles and they kept the pressure on him. Like, I mean, Tennessee fans will say, "Oh, just like Heupel said, we just turned it down because we were winning by so much." No, the defense was a problem. That was why they did not want to put themselves in bad situations because the defense kept causing turnovers or causing havoc. So there was no reason to even believe that Nico just had a great game. He, like you said, most of the season, Nico was not very good. Yeah, granted, I'm still very high on Nico as well, and I think that his ceiling is still very high. And I knew that it was going to take him at least a year to really get the speed as a young quarterback for the SEC because defenses are ready for him. Like, you didn't see much running from Nico this year, if you noticed, but you did see the pressure come to him. And like you said, at moments he couldn't figure out how to get rid of the ball. And so that's nothing against Nico himself. It's the learning curve of dealing with some of the best defensive minds in college football, especially between the Big Ten and the SEC. A lot of those minds are elite and they're NFL caliber. So it's going to take time. I think, though, for Mateer, I don't think it's going to take him that long. The biggest thing for him is going to be getting his wide receivers up to speed. We've talked about that, getting the wide receivers up to speed and then the offensive line, making sure they're up to speed, which I have no concerns about the offensive line because we actually have some experience this time around. A lot of returning snaps. The wide receiver room is the ones that are going to need to get in a sync, and luckily, the wide receivers are really the easiest, John, when it comes to actually getting acclimated. We've seen teams turn over an entire wide receiver room and them excel. I mean, heck, Texas did it last year. As long as your offensive coordinator can draw it up, those dudes will figure it out, especially if you got a quarterback that knows the playbook.
Yeah, and you have an offensive line that can block a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
That matters. That does matter.
That's all that matters.
I mean, John Mateer's going to need a little bit of help around him. He can't do it all himself, even though the statistics might look like he did it all himself. He's going to need some help. Anybody else ranked above him that kind of stands out to you? I think Diego Pavia is a fine quarterback. Talent-wise, I don't necessarily think he's as good as John Mateer, but you can't discount the intangibles and what he brought to Vanderbilt.
No, you can't. And and looking up his stats. I mean, his last year at New Mexico State, he had 2,900 yards passing and 900 yards rushing. So in a similar realm of the way that John Mateer put up numbers. So I can't say that because in the next season he put up 3,000 total yards, which is a drop from what he did, even though he ran for like 800 yards. That's still kind of a drop from what he did in New Mexico State. He was able to show that he could translate and getting in the big wins that he got. I did think that was a little bit higher than I would have expected. Lagway is really high. And I see the vision in DJ Lagway, but I don't know about him being a number 4. Now, granted, a lot of people think that he could potentially become an All-American quarterback and be up there for the Heisman because the talent is there. I totally get it. I just need to see a little bit more of him on the field and him being healthy with the way that Billy Napier be using him. But those two probably are two I'm just like, ooh, those are a little bit steep.
Like if you're going to take a young quarterback, and put him at 1, I mean, Lenora Sellers or DJ Lagway make a lot more sense than Arch Manning.
Yep.
Because we've seen them do it in the SEC last year.
Right.
That's kind of where I come from. And again, I think Arch Manning is a very talented quarterback. So please don't mistake me for hating on the kid. I think
John's hating.
I mean, okay, I'm hating. Horns down, hate. Arch sucks. He played against nobody in Louisiana. He was terrible. He got propped up by bad competition. He shouldn't have been a 5-star, 3-star Arch. If his last name was anything other than Manning, he'd probably been a 3-star. There. Okay.
Love it.
Coming up next here on Locked On Sooners, we're going to talk about some NIL changes coming in other states. Could they come to Oklahoma, and how would that matter? We'll discuss coming up next here on Locked On Sooners.
when the game tips off, the NBA action is getting started, and there's no better place to get in on that than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. If you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay. So like tonight with the NBA, I'm looking at this Toronto Raptors Indiana game. Very intriguing line with the Pacers being a 9.5-point favorite. You can also do player props. Like I'm looking at my Oklahoma City Thunder, 17-point favorites in Brooklyn. They need a good bounce back game. So there's a great way to jump into that action by checking out FanDuel. So right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bet if you win your first $5 bet. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA.
Again, thanks for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Shout out to all the everydayers. The college football landscape is constantly changing, constantly evolving. We got revenue sharing. It's going to be coming down the line at some point. We'll discuss some proposals that we're seeing along SEC lines that might impact Oklahoma probably a little bit later this week. But there's one change that is being proposed in Louisiana that could have an impact on Oklahoma down the road. A Louisiana lawmaker is proposing a bill that would remove NIL funds from being required to pay state income tax.
Yep.
Now, why that would matter? Similarly to what you see in professional sports, where agents and teams try to use states like Texas and Florida and their lack of income tax as a perk for luring a player to those franchises. Oklahoma has a state income tax currently. Governor Kevin Stitt, I think I saw recently on social media that he is attempting to move to removing state income tax from Oklahomans and them not having to pay it. So that could be something that we see down the road anyway from Oklahoma without it having to be NIL related.
Yeah, and it's very fascinating too. It kind of goes back to the initial NIL conversation that a lot of people have had. The biggest concern they have for these young players is, how are they going to cover their taxes? What are they going to be able to do with that? And I've said this numerous times. The one thing that I expect from a coaching staff that walks into a home and tells the parents that they are leaders of men and their goal is to help their child be a great, contributor to society, and while also teaching them life lessons and stuff on the football field and being, the best football player possible, that these coaches would find a way to make sure that they've got the best accountants, the best lawyers, and best all of that. Because if you're a leader of men, that's kind of one of the things you would lead with as well, being fiscally responsible while also, taking care of business on and off the field. So I would expect that the organization would have that stuff in line to help prepare that kind of stuff, right? I mean, at least that's my thought process on it. This is another example of people love their sports, John. Mm-hmm. Like school, states, fans, they love their sports. And because of that, they're going to find any way, shape, or form to get an advantage. And in the article for Louisiana talking about it, their biggest thing is that Georgia's doing it, Alabama's doing it, Illinois is doing it, and we're going to be competing with them for athletes because those are hotbeds of athletes, like Atlanta area. Alabama's got a ton of talent, mainly because of being so close to Georgia and Florida. Illinois having the Chicago Metro and all of that. They've got talent that these schools want. So Louisiana's like, no, we're not going to put ourselves in a situation that's going to be in a disadvantage. And so I expect that in order for a lot of these schools to want to compete, they're going to find a way to make sure that these kids can keep as much money in their pockets as possible. So the fear of them in taxes, John, kind of misplaced. People are going to find a way to make sure these kids are successful. Now, they're going to make stupid decisions, but everyone's allowed to do that. I was allowed to do it. You were allowed to do it. Everybody's allowed to make a stupid decision. I think that they should be afforded that opportunity as well, while at the same time understanding that states are going to find a way to get themselves a competitive advantage as possible.
Yeah, it seems like it's a domino effect. Once one state does it, then it becomes a thing around the country. I think Texas, Florida, they've got a little bit of that advantage already in place because there's no state income tax. And so if you're Oklahoma, for example, you want to be in a position where you can tell your athletes in Texas, hey, if you come to Oklahoma, that's not going to be an issue. You're not going to have to pay state income tax. It's not going to be a thing that you have to worry about. Same for when you're recruiting down in Florida. You love to recruit Florida, Brent Venables, Todd Bates, Miguel Chavis. You want to get down there. You want to recruit those kids to Oklahoma. It's the same thing. So it's going to be a domino effect. At some point, it'll take effect here in Oklahoma because they've tried to respond in a similar way, allowing businesses to write off NIL donations, or they've made changes that have happened across the NIL landscape. And absent of anything happening at the federal level with name, image, and likeness, it's up to the states basically to decide how this is all going to run, because the NCAA is not going to get their hands in it. They don't want to mess with any of this, especially as the House settlement is still being worked on and still working to an official agreement. They don't want to have any part of it. So it's going to be up to the states to basically decide their own NIL legislation.
Yeah, and we know that that's going to happen until the settlement comes in, and all of these stuff, their plan is to put these in place before that settlement comes through, while at the same time, because I know Oklahoma made it to where they could start, compensating players a little bit earlier, sometime last year. That's kind of a bill that's coming down the line. And so we understand that every state is trying to find a competitive advantage for their state schools to be able to compete in NIL. And so once House settlement comes down, which probably won't be until like late April, early May, because, as judges are really thumbing through this, they're understanding some of the, ridiculousness that are being asked, and I guess the quote unquote injustices that are being thrown out there. So I don't expect any of this stuff to settle very soon. And just like you said, NCAA ain't going to help nobody. NCAA doesn't want to have anything to do with this. They're pretty terrible when it comes to, man, they could have had this fixed a long time ago. They could have had this all set up with no problem. But the thing is that if the NCAA had fixed it, then they would have to admit fault or admit they were at fault and did everybody dirty with antitrust all the way back, to the inception of collegiate sports. So I get where their position is that, yeah, we don't want to look like we got egg on our face because we were wrong. But at the same time, thinking that the federal government's going to do anything to help the actual NCAA without realizing that every single rep in there is going to be trying to find a way to take care of their own state, stuff's going to get a little murky. And so it's going to take some time. It's going to take some time for all this to wash over. Right now, it's Wild Wild West. Yes, I understand people don't like that. But I still don't understand the blame on the kids for any of this, because they're just playing with the rules and parameters that have been placed in front of them. These are adults trying to find ways to keep money into their pockets, or keep money in the pocket of the organizations. When in all actuality, if they would just, admit fault and just take care of these kids from the beginning, we wouldn't be talking about it. Then we wouldn't be having all of these ridiculous NIL conversations.
Yeah, it's one of those, we're just kind of playing catch up now.
Yep.
Universities, networks have made billions off of the backs of athletes for decades, for a millennia. And now everybody's playing catch up and trying to figure out how to make this all work in a way that creates competitive balance and is legit, because there's still some questions as to really what is NIL, what is name, image, and likeness. And, through the collectives, through individual donors, it's a very broad definition what we're seeing. And we're not necessarily seeing NIL in the spirit of what NIL might have supposed to be. Like, this is like, hey, Terrell Pryor, you want to go get tattoos and you want to promote that tattoo parlor for giving you free tattoos? Okay, you want to trade merchandise for tattoos? That's well within your right to do that. Like, this is trying to erase some of that stuff. Rhett Bomar, you want to go and be on salary with an auto dealer and then, bump them on social media. Okay, Rhett Bomar, you can go do that and not have to get kicked off of the team because of it. So this is like erasing some of the wrongs of the past, where it's like, this should be basic. Or if, John Mateer wants to do an autograph signing and charge a little bit of money for it, who does that hurt? It hurts nobody. But
Yeah.
I think we're still wading through, like you said, the murky waters of NIL, and there's going to be some more evolution that comes out of it, because we're not by any stretch of the imagination close to a final resolution on what NIL is supposed to look like. And apparently we're not close to a final resolution on the future of Porter Moser with the Oklahoma men's basketball team. Let's discuss that coming up next here on Locked On Sooners. Again, thanks for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Shout out to all the everydayers. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Also, go check out the Locked On College Football Podcast with Spencer McLaughlin. There's a lot of great discussions happening over there between the SEC and Big 12, and with college football playoff expansion happening. He's got some thoughts that might align with some of your thoughts as well on expansion. But Porter Moser, man, he's been a dude that's been under fire all season long. It looked like after a 13-0 start that he had this thing well on its way to making the NCAA tournament. Well, some losses here in the last couple of weeks, including a long losing streak, bumped them out of the tournament, but maybe got back on the right side of the bubble against Mississippi State. Jeff Borzello of ESPN had this to say about Porter Moser. Porter Moser appears primed to get another season in Norman. I'm just going to let that sink in for a second. Especially after the Sooners picked up a massive win against Mississippi State over the weekend to boost their NCAA tournament hopes. The Sooners started 13-0, though they struggled recently. Oklahoma has yet to make an NCAA tournament appearance under Moser, though it's also a program perceived to have one of the lowest NIL budgets in the SEC. Moser would reportedly be owed just shy of $8 million.
I mean, it's what Brent Venables makes. About $8 million. So one season salary of BV to send Porter out of there. So yeah, you let that sink in, John. It still is pretty painful. Are we really going to do this? After his fourth year, he finally makes a tournament. We're going to go ahead and say, nah, we're good. We're going to go ahead and let you stick around for another year. I really hope not, because it's not I'm not anti-Porter. My problem has been literally as soon as we get into conference play, things just fall apart. And it doesn't feel like there's any creativity with his offenses. It feels like if he's not going to out there getting a bunch of one and dones like Fears on a regular basis, it's going to be really tough to be competitive in the NCAA. You can't, if you're going to have a team of players that's supposed to play like a team, then they need to actually look like they're playing like a team. And it doesn't feel like that in most cases, especially in conference play. Now, this is the thing that still surprises me, John. I'm still trying to understand this. This is what I can't fathom it. It's a thing I can't grasp. This is the first year of Oklahoma playing basketball in the SEC. Why doesn't this feel like non-conference games the entire season? Like, they don't know who you are. This should feel like your non-con schedule. Why is it that every time you get into conference play, things fall apart? We saw it all the last 3 years in the Big 12, and you would have thought that the SEC would at least give you 1 year grace of, it just feels more like, non-con, nobody knows. No. It's just like he just forgets how to coach. I don't get it. That's what I need to answer for. Somebody can answer that for me. I think I'll be okay.
Well, I mean, just the SEC talent is that much better than what Oklahoma has.
Fair. Big 12 was really good too.
It was, and that's why Oklahoma struggled in the Big 12. I mean, for 4 years now, basically, we're just a few games from the end of the regular season. For 4 years, we've seen the same story out of Porter Moser. We've seen teams that struggle to close out games, teams that struggle late games. I mean, how many shot clock violations or near shot clock violations have we seen from this team this year? And unless Jeremiah Fears is just going off and looking like a lottery pick, Oklahoma struggles. When Jeremiah Fears struggles, Oklahoma struggles even worse. So it's to me, I think if he were to get them into the tournament and they go on a Sweet 16 type of run, then maybe. At the same time, what's your turnover going to look like again this offseason? Because if you go on a Sweet 16 type run, Jeremiah Fears is off to the NBA. Like, he's not coming back for another year. Because if you went on a Sweet 16 type run, Jeremiah Fears played really, really well and had all of the national eyeballs on him, and he's going to be a lottery pick.
Yep.
I'm not ready to make. I mean, I still feel like moving on is probably the best way forward. At the same time, $8 million is a lot of money. And if you have to pay that buyout, now it's prorated monthly, according to George Stoya. So it'd be paid out. You're not paying out $8 million in one lump sum. That money could be better spent with rev sharing and NIL. So there's that. But
Yeah.
if you improve your NIL budget for basketball, how much of a difference will that make with Porter Moser at the helm? Does it make a difference?
Question.
I don't know how much of a difference it would make, because again, to me, that there seems to be enough talent to be more competitive. A lot of it just seems schematic, and like, again, Porter Moser seems like a great dude. At the same time, he's kind of frenetic on the sideline, and teams match your coach's energy. When a coach is calm and chill and relaxed, your team plays like that. When your coach is kind of just restless and antsy and, I feel like just constantly doing something, I think your team matches that energy too. Like, he just looks restless, and maybe it's because his seat is hot and the pressure's on and all that. But I just don't know. I still feel like unless they go on a deep run, they're going to have to make a tough decision, and they're going to have to look somewhere else, because so far through almost 4 seasons, he hasn't proven capable of elevating this team
at all. I guess the question now is, John, do you think that they can make the tournament? There's 4 games left in the year.
They gotta win at least one more. Like, you got to win one of these games against Ole Miss or Kentucky, or you got to beat Texas on the road. Like, win a ranked game. If you win a game over a top 25 team, I think you're in. If you play those games close-ish and then you beat Texas on the road, I think you could still be in, potentially. It's going to be close, though.
Yeah, that's true.
Your best chance is going to be when you face Kentucky at home on Wednesday night,
or Missouri.
Yeah, Missouri. Yeah, you get Missouri at home. That's going to be a good chance too. But again, you're going to need your team playing like they did against Mississippi State. You're going to need Sam Godwin to go do what Sam Godwin did and be very, very efficient. You're going to have Jeremiah Fears play the way Jeremiah Fears did. I think Jalen Moore, he can have a better shooting night, and that can help you. But you got to get more efficiency out of Sam Godwin. You got to have him involved. Like, having him not involved in the offense was part of the issue. But keeping him involved, making sure that you have a low post threat or at least an inside presence, that does benefit everybody else. So I don't know, man. I think they've got to win at least one ranked game to really solidify themselves as a tournament team. That gets them to 18 wins, and that would put them at 5 SEC wins. That's not great by any stretch of the imagination, but like 18 wins in the ACC back in the day, that gets you into the tournament. If you go, if you go 5-13 in the ACC, or I don't know how many conference games they used to have back in the day, but if you had that record or that winning percentage in the ACC back in the day, that would have gotten you into the tournament.
No, that's true. And I think that the fascinating thing too is, if they make the tournament with 18 wins after missing the tournament last year with 20 wins and 8 conference wins in the Big 12, I'm going to laugh.
Yeah.
I'm going to laugh at that, because it's kind of hilarious that it kind of came around that way, while at the same time still don't get why you would put them in the tournament. Now, I know they're in the last 4 in, so they're on the bubble. You got to, like I said, you got to win at least one more ranked game to get yourself in there, but that many losses in conference just does not feel like a team that should be in there. Now, like you said, if they go in there and they win, they'll probably go into the play-in. If they win that and win like a first-round game, there's a chance that Porter's going to end up coming back. So Coach Moser will be back at Oklahoma, and man, we may riot. I think that's probably what's going to happen, John. People are going to fight. Somebody's going to get hurt if he ends up back because of that.
Yeah, you look at them, like, so they have more quad 1 wins than teams like Indiana, Rutgers, Arkansas, Texas, Louisville. Like, they're 5-8 against quad 1 teams. What might hurt them is their quad 1 or their quad 2 and 3 records where they have a loss. And that might be what keeps them out. But your wins over Michigan from non-conference, that's going to matter. Your win over Arizona, your win against Providence, those things are going to play a factor. Even if you did struggle in SEC play, you struggled, but yes, you've got a win over a top 25 Mississippi State team. You beat Vanderbilt when they were a top 25 team. So you do have some wins to your ledger that are like, okay. And I mean, we see how good the SEC is. Georgia just beat Florida. Okay. You lost to Georgia, yes, but they just beat Florida. So,
good point.
I mean, dude, anything's possible. And you get into the tournament and then anything's possible. And I mean, you're a battle tested team that's gone up against the best of the best in the SEC. And who knows what could happen. I think
still crazy.
It's still crazy.
It's still crazy that SEC is going to have potentially 3, if not 4, 1 seeds. That's still just ridiculous.
I don't think the tournament committee would give them all 4 just out of respect for the rest of the country. Like, even if they are the top 4 teams in the country in like the coaches poll or the AP, I just don't think that they do it. I think that they'll reserve at least 1 for Houston, or 1 for a Pac or a Big Ten school or something like that. It just seems like it'd be really shocking if they were to give all 4 to the SEC. The SEC bias would be for real. Now it has translated to basketball. It used to be football and baseball only. Now it's going to be, or even softball, because softball had all 13 teams in the NCAA tournament last year. The SEC bias will be for real. But hey, that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Sooners. Thanks so much for tuning in, being a part of the show. Subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. So hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell to let you know when new episodes drop. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Follow Jay at Unfair Sports. Go check out his show on YouTube at Unfair Sports as well. You can follow me at John 9 Williams. You can read my work covering the Sooners over at SoonersWire.com. The show is at Locked On Sooners on all of your favorite social media profiles, platforms, and what have you. But until next time, he's Jay Smith. I'm John Williams. We'll talk to you then. Boomer
Sooner.
Yeah, after all that, we're still talking about maybe Porter
Moser
coming back.
Fire that man.
My goodness.